Today on the Big 6 in 60, the Warriors will play with the season on the line against the Clippers.
Did overall season react our expectations before the season tipped off to now?
Indiana basketball lands a couple of commitments out of the transfer portal.
3 commitments for Indiana basketball out of the portal today.
And the Patriots look at options in the upcoming NFL draft.
How would you grade this year's draft talent compared to last year's draft talent?
This is the Big 6 in 60, the 6 biggest national sports stories from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now. Thank you for making the Big 6 in 60 your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Philadelphia closed the regular season at 45-37 and now gets Orlando in the 7-8 play-in, with the winner moving on to face Boston in the first round. Keith Pompey and Mark Farzetta with Locked On 76ers preview that matchup.
I'll call it, Keith, a glimmer of hope. Best case scenario, Joel Embiid coming back. The overall season react our expectations before the season tipped off to now, and then how the play-in plays out. First, it wasn't all gravy for the Sixers in this game against the Milwaukee Bucks. Nick Nurse even said after the game, Keith, yeah, maybe we wanted them to be a little bit easier than we thought they would be, and they weren't. Unfortunately, it wasn't until the third quarter where Tyrese Maxey said, all right, boys, get on my back. Here we go. And he rattled off 15 points like it was nothing in the quarter alone on his way to 21 of the night. And then the Boston Celtics, they somehow, with a team of backups and bench players, they go out there and they beat the Orlando Magic. Made it interesting late, but really controlled throughout the game. So, the last day of the season, Keith, what was your reaction to how everything played out?
I mean, I think that the fact that the Boston Celtics won that game, it played out to me to saying that Joe Mazzulla was going to be my coach of the year. Like, I get a vote
Hell yeah.
for the NBA, and I'm going to make him the coach of the year. I got friends first. But as far as the Sixers, sometimes, when you play a team and you're basically playing a shell of a squad, you tend to go through the motions a little bit. And then all of a sudden, you just turn it on and you put them out their misery. And that's what the 76ers did. But to me, Orlando, that was a bad loss. Now, again, they were locked into playing the 76ers. It was just a matter of, are you going to be at home or are you going to be away? But you would have thought that they would have done a better job to win that game going up against those backups like that. And we're talking about backups to the backups because, this team was – this was supposed to be an off season for the Celtics. So a lot of guys stepped up who you didn't think were capable of doing that. And a lot of those guys didn't play yesterday. And then they had, the C team, so to speak. And
Ron Harper Jr. Here, let me just give this while you're mentioning that. Ron Harper Jr., 3.1 points per game this year, 27 yesterday. Baylor Shireman, 4.8 points per game this season. 30 points yesterday. I didn't even look up Luka Garza, but he had 27 as well, including a clutch 3 at the end of the game there for the Celtics. I mean, I in no way, shape, or form, I want to say for the record, was rooting for the Celtics. Just like I can't root for the Pittsburgh Penguins, just like I can't root for the Dallas Cowboys. I'll always hope the team they're playing loses if it benefits Philadelphia, but I'll never root. I'll more so root against a team than I will ever root for a rival. But no denying, Joe Mazzulla and the Boston Celtics helped out the Sixers greatly yesterday.
They did. And, I mean, you look at it, this lined up perfectly for the 76ers. I mean, it did. Like, of all the teams, now I get it. I know Maxey brought up the fact that, this team had a 5-game winning streak, talking about the Orlando Magic. They had a 5-game winning streak heading into yesterday's loss to Boston. Everyone's talking about this team is, finally healthy. This team has been snake bitten, kind of, sort of speak, just like the Sixers when it came down to injuries this year. And for the most part, they are healthy. But I think that this everything is aligned for the 76ers right now to get that number 7 seed. And, that's what they want. I mean, that's probably the best case scenario for them. Because when you look at it, I don't know if they could beat the Charlotte Hornets right now. I just don't know that. And again, I get it. I know they beat them last week. But if I had to play a team in a play-in tournament without Joel Embiid, I would rather play Orlando, even though it's going to be tough. But I would rather play Orlando as opposed to playing Charlotte in the Miami Heat right about now, because we know what these guys are. Charlotte, they're playing with house money. They're eager. In Miami, they're just a great coach. And it just seems like this is a team people forget. They're a team that went from the play-in tournament to the NBA Finals, right? So those are the two teams I do not want to play if I'm the 76ers.
All right. Well, you mentioned Tyrese Maxey. After they beat the Pacers, did you see VJ sticking his head in there? I'm not ripping VJ by any means, but he was like trying to be funny. They just won. Maxey's doing the post-game interview. He grabbed his right pinky towards the end of the third quarter, maybe, and then still came out in the fourth quarter, which was good to help the Sixers win. But did you see that post-game interview by chance?
Yeah, I saw it.
It was an odd vibe from Maxey because, look, I'm not expecting him to do cartwheels, especially with a hurt finger, but I'm not expecting him to do cartwheels over beating the Pacers. But you catch him in the locker room after that interview, and he went from kind of like no nonsense to then literally saying, I just want us to go into the postseason, and I'm going to call it the postseason with good vibes. And I'm like, well, something wasn't vibing right there. And I'm not implying at all that there's any rift between VJ or Maxey like people tried to insinuate earlier in the season. Not even close. I got this sense from him that the job wasn't done. There was still work ahead of them, and they wanted to make sure at the absolute worst, this is a dubious distinction, but at the absolute worst, they were going to be the number 1 seed in the play-in tournament, which is what they are. But I just kind of got an odd vibe from Maxey. What do you think his head's at right now?
I mean, I kind of like what you're saying, well, first of all, here's the thing. A lot of times when you are injured and you have certain things going on, you want to be as serious. And also you got a young guy. I mean, you want to be as serious. You want everything to be as normal as possible. But then also you have a young guy on the team who's lollygagging, having a good time. Not saying a bad vibe, but you do want to go in there with a business-like atmosphere. Like, it's not done. It's basically like not done. We still got a lot of work to do. So that's kind of like how I took it a little bit, like similar to you, like one of those things like, look, bro, like, we got another game. We got another game because you got to realize it's easy at that particular point to lose a lot of focus. I mean, because, you go and you're coming off of, first of all, Maxey is aware that they were coming off a 3-game losing streak. Some of those losses were kind of bad, right? Like they just imploded at inopportune times. So then you get a victory over the Indiana Pacers, a team that rested just about everyone. And now you got to go and you have to play against Milwaukee, another team that that's going to rest just about everyone, and a team that's struggling. So you got to keep that focus. You know what I mean? You got to keep everything focused and moving forward. And it's also one of those things where I felt like if the cameras weren't there and Maxey was, cognizant that he was being taped and he was on TV, whereas, you know what I mean? Like, you got to keep that professionalism. Now, I'm telling you, there's certain guys, they act different. Not to say Maxey is one of them, but he was been like, look, man, stop messing around, yada, yada, and laughed it off. But I think he just wanted to show a level of professionalism just because of the things I talked about.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. All right, when we come back, I do want to look a little bit at the season as a whole at this point. The season is over. Now it's about the postseason and making it into the actual playoffs, not just the consolation prize here.
The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, the extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. As we round out the regular season, the Celtics play the Knicks in Madison Square Garden tonight. Line is at -5 on FanDuel. If you want to go the other way, Boston money line is 176, plus 176 on that line. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. Golden State's season is on the line Wednesday after a 115-110 loss, locked in a winner-go-home rematch with the Clippers, and Steph Curry is still expected to be on a minutes restriction. Charlie Walter with Locked On Warriors sets the stage for that elimination game.
Let's talk about the game that just went down, Warriors and Clippers. The Clippers were able to win by 5. Glass half full. When the Warriors played their dudes, they controlled the game. The final score was not really indicative of how this one went when the Warriors were able to run out their actual dress rehearsal. You look at their team, and Al Horford was a +10, Kristaps Porzingis a +5, Steph Curry a +13, Melton a +4, Podziemski a +16, off the bench Guy Santos a +8, Gary Payton a +2. Add in Draymond Green to the fold, who didn't play, and those are your 8 guys that hopefully Steve Kerr is playing and doesn't tinker around with in this winner-go-home matchup against LA. Now, you look at it from LA's perspective, they played the game without Kawhi Leonard, who's one of the best players in the league. But I do think that this game, a 5-point loss in LA, making it 9 in a row in that building, I think it was a little misleading of how the Warriors looked, because they came out of the gate hot. And then when they made subs, it was clearly like, hey, let's just throw Seth and Nate Williams and Pat Spencer and Will Richard and all these guys that may not even play in the play-in game on the floor together, so we can see the best version of us in one piece. Are you feeling encouraged about this winner-go-home game coming up?
I don't know if I'm feeling encouraged, but everything you said is true. And I would add to that, if beyond all of that and Draymond not playing at all, the starters weren't in at the end of the game. You know, none of the players who matter were in at the end of the game, and none of them played that well. Besides, Steph was Steph, but he wasn't super Steph. You know, it wasn't a great Steph Curry game. It was a average Steph Curry game, which is great if you understand the distinction. So I was just looking at the same box score you were. Podziemski's like 3 for 10, you know. Who was the starting small forward in this game? I guess Porzingis, technically. Porzingis is 3 for 8. Podziemski's 3 for 10. Melton's 1 for 6. If all of them, if you just bump their shooting percentage to 50%, the Warriors win this game, right? Even in limited minutes, even without playing one of their better players at all. So, I mean, I would be super encouraged if they were going to play that Clippers team again this week. But of course, the question is, you know, I don't think anyone believes that the Warriors getting Draymond back is the equivalent of the Clippers getting Kawhi Leonard back. You know, if the Warriors want to beat the Clippers, Draymond has to play, and also Steph probably has to have an even better game, and also Kristaps Porzingis doesn't have to be an all-star, but he's got to shoot the ball better, which has been a real struggle lately. And Podziemski's got to shoot the ball better, and Melton's probably got to score more. You know what I mean? Everybody is going to have to be better in order for this game to go the way you want it to on Wednesday.
All right, so we always do, I think we've done it like 4 times at this point, The Bachelor, and we give out our roses. We have 10 roses. Like, Steve Kerr has to shrink this rotation, right?
Correct.
For the first time, I'm agreeing with you. I don't need to see any Pat Spencer in the postseason. Maybe Nate Williams for like some point of attack defense, a few spot minutes here or there. Charles Bassey continues to look good. Maybe you give him a crack at the rotation. But I just mentioned, like, there was a case study on this game to see like what works. And the starting lineup worked. Like
Right.
Horford, Porzingis, Curry, Melton, Podziemski, that lineup worked. They looked good when they were out there.
Key
You bring
Santos
in
played well.
Leons, and you bring in Seth, and you bring in Peyton and all these guys. That didn't work. So who are the 10 that Steve's going to run with? And do you actually think that he does that in kind of a win or go home situation? He can tinker around if he gets 7 games in the postseason. He may have to in certain games that get out of hand. You give some guys some rest, but your only mission right now should be, hey, we got 1 game. Let's win that game and let's figure it out from there. There's no more load management. There's no more rest. Like if there is, then this team's going nowhere.
Oh, shout out 09 Marathon there. I'm afraid that person is correct. But if you're asking me what I would do, of course, Pat Spencer would not be part of it. It's obviously the 5 who started last night. Draymond probably starts instead of Horford, but same 5 guys are playing. So that's 6 with Draymond. Guy Santos is playing. Gary Payton is playing. That's 8. And then I would put Will Richard and Charles Bassey in the and Seth Curry in the maybe column. Maybe you use 2 out of 3 of those guys. The thing about it is Bassey probably depends how much Horford is ready to play. And Porzingis as well. Like, do you need a third big man in this game? If so, he's the guy. I'm not sure you do, though, because the Clippers aren't especially big. Yeah, they are supposed to get Isaiah Jackson back, I believe, for the play-in game, but he'll be coming off injury. I don't know how much he'll play, etc. I don't know if they need more big minutes, but if they do, that's Bassey. I don't know if they need an extra shooter, but if they do, that's Seth. And I don't know if they're going to need a guy who you can really count on to defend, but maybe not so much on offense. And if I did need that guy, I can understand people saying Nate Williams, because I like Nate Williams, but I think Will Richard is still the guy if I need a wing defender who, I hope can hit a couple threes. I think Will Richard is ahead of Nate Williams in that.
So
in that
answer
rotation.
the second part of that question. And the second part of that question is, will Steve Kerr actually shrink the rotation? We haven't seen it in a long time, but he hasn't had the luxury of a win or go home game, a game that mattered.
It's been so long since a game mattered. That's important to remember. And he always does shrink the rotation historically in the playoffs. So I don't know. I think it's likely that the rotation shrinks. I think it's 50-50 whether it shrinks in a way that I think is the best way.
22 minutes of Leons?
No, I mean, I think Leons, look, assuming Porzingis and Horford and Guy and Draymond and all these guys are available, I think we can safely assume that Malachi Leons will not be involved. But the rest of these guys, I'm not sure I know how he's deciding at any given moment whether to put in Pat Spencer or Seth Curry or Gary Payton. I'm not sure I have the answer to that. I think Gary Payton is clearly the most valuable of that 3, with Seth close behind and Pat Spencer a distant last place. But that's obviously not how Steve Kerr sees it. So we'll see. It's going to be very interesting, assuming he does shrink the rotation, which I think is a pretty safe assumption. It'll be interesting to see who bubbles up and who finds the bench.
The Hornets earned the number 9 seed at 44-38 in the East and now hosts Miami in an elimination game, with the Hornets trying to reach the playoffs for the first time since 2016. Doug Branson and Walker Mell of Locked On Hornets look ahead at that matchup.
It's over, man. Regular season, it's done. For a long time, that meant that the Hornets' overall season was officially done, but not this year. Not this year, no siree, Bob. After having a pretty bad start to the season because of injuries and a bunch of different excuses, now the Hornets have finished with 44 victories in the regular season. They are etched in stone to play in this 9-10 matchup, and they're hosting a play-in game, Doug. They are the 9 seed officially. They are hosting the 10 seed in the Miami Heat, and they will play first, actually, to get postseason basketball tipped off officially. They'll play tomorrow at the Spectrum Center, 7:30 on Prime. Noah Eagle and Stan Van Gundy on the call.
Ooh.
We're here, and we're not done playing basketball. You absolutely love to see it.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic. Good times are here again. Any postseason experience for LaMelo Ball, for Brandon Miller, for Con Knippel is only going to benefit them. And obviously getting actual playoff experience is the ultimate goal and would be just such a significant increase in our expectations for this season. I mean, I think in some sense, from a fan perspective, the team is playing with house money. I don't think the team sees it that way. They're certainly trying to improve every single day and win every single one of these games. I don't think they're going to take their foot off the gas, but I think there is a little bit of nervousness that I've noticed from folks that are participating in Every Hornets box score and on Twitter, asking if the Hornets not taking their foot off the gas, but after that loss in the really in the fourth quarter of that Detroit game, and then the way the Knicks, the reserve Knicks, the Westchester Knicks hung around in the final game versus the Hornets starters, maybe not foot off the gas, maybe running out of gas, the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah, I mean, and we can get to that for sure. And for those that are wondering how we feel about the regular season overall, I don't know, eulogy, is that the right word? We can give the eulogy for it a little bit later on because the regular season is officially dead. So we can give our thoughts on the 44-win season, the season turnaround. But we got a lot to focus on with the Miami Heat in town, the fact that the Hornets are actually hosting a play-in game instead of having to go to Atlanta, instead of having to go to Indianapolis. They don't have to do that now. They get to host a play-in game. Again, 7:30 Spectrum Center tomorrow. If they win in the 9-10 matchup, that means they will play the loser of the 7-8 matchup, and that game will take place on Friday, and that game is going to be between the Magic and the 76ers. We don't know. It looks like Joel Embiid's going to be out because of the emergency appendicitis. Don't know exactly the official designation for him regarding that injury, but that's a big deal. And the Magic, they lost to the Maine Celtics. If the Westchester Knicks were hanging around with the Hornets yesterday, felt like the Maine, the Red Claws? They were the ones that actually beat Orlando with Joe Mazzulla holding his guys out. And it looks like bad vibes in Orlando all around. So if you win this game, then I think people will look at this as somewhat of a favorable matchup, whoever the 7-8 loss is. But you got to deal with that pesky Heat team, the playoff zombies that they are. Eric Spoelstra having won a championship, having coached a couple teams to the finals. Even when they're an 8 seed, Doug, they even still find a way to upset a 1 seed in order to reach the NBA Finals. It's absolutely ridiculous what this Heat team does. No matter if you think that they're finally left for dead, that's when they resurrect from the dead. And here they are, that 10 seed. They're 11-10 since March 1st, which is about a quarter of the season. They've been very good offensively. They've not been so good defensively. And we can talk about the Hornets possibly running out of gas and how they match up. But it's amazing that here they are having to go through their, I guess, historic rivals. Pistons kind of figuring out if they're going to be the new rivals of the Hornets right now. That's certainly possible. But here they are with a chance to beat their historic rival in order to get over the hump and then possibly play some playoff basketball.
Well, it's certainly an opportunity to exercise some demons, both in the fact that they've lost both of their play-in opportunities as a 10 seed. They're a 9 seed in this instance, but as a 10 seed, they lost both of their play-in opportunities by large margins. So you get to exercise that demon.
Yeah.
You get to exercise the demon of losing to the Miami Heat in the postseason. You could do all of that, and then, as you were alluding to, at that point, I wouldn't say your door is wide open, but you have shown you can beat the Magic, and they seem wounded. They seem like they've given up on their coach a little bit. And then the Philadelphia 76ers were the team that really scared me the most, and they certainly still have a lot of talent without Embiid, but Embiid is the cheat code. Embiid is the player that you really cannot solve. You can just hope that you get him to have a little bit of a milder performance than he normally had. But no one on the Hornets was going to really be able to stop Joel Embiid. And so you catch, obviously, hope he's okay and recovering from surgery and can, if the Sixers advance, he can, go on to play and get healthy again. But you certainly catch a break. If you're the Hornets, you don't have to deal with that cheat code until you get into the actual playoffs. I am concerned. I am a little concerned by the way that they got, quote, punked, as Grant Williams put it, by the Detroit Pistons, by the physicality. And I said, I didn't think it was a must win when we had that conversation. I said, but don't get blown out. Don't get embarrassed. I mean, the margin of defeat there, not incredible, but 18, that's bad. I think you would qualify that as a little bit of a blowout. And it's just the way that Detroit was able to essentially move them out of the paint makes you wonder, like, are they really ready? Because they played better defense, but are they really ready for the physicality that the playoffs are going to present?
You know, the question about them running out of gas is interesting because you could look at it holistically or you could look at it in parts. Are they running out of gas in each one of these games? But in between then, they refuel, but they just refuel enough for 3 quarters worth of basketball because it's been the fourth quarter that they've run out of gas against all of these opponents, right? Against the Celtics, 3 quarters, they're going at it. Celtics end that third quarter on a 10-0 run. Fourth quarter happens and they separate. Against Detroit, they were right there. They could have won that game going into the fourth quarter, and then in the fourth quarter, they quote-unquote possibly run out of gas with the physicality, and God almighty, they had like 2 points well into the fourth quarter of this one, only scoring 10 in the final period. You might have started to see some of the signs against New York a couple of weeks ago in the win at the Spectrum Center, where they had like 6 of 9 possessions that ended in a turnover in that 6-minute stretch of the fourth. Kobe White was awesome in that game, so they found a way to hold on. They lose to the Celtics, right? Like, we've seen good opponents that have taken over in the final quarter, and maybe it's youth, maybe it's inexperience, maybe it's a simple matter of taking care of the basketball a little more. But when we talk about, I don't know if the Hornets have it, it's interesting because maybe it's not so much that the season is so long, although there's that argument as well, and I could hear that. It feels like it's happening on a game-to-game basis in some of the losses they've experienced recently.
And I would bring up the Philadelphia loss that they took, where they built a significant first half lead and then gave it up in the second half. And I don't recall how much a factor turnovers were there, but they certainly were in that fourth quarter against Detroit. LaMelo had 4 of them, Kobe had 1, Klein had 1, and then you go into this game against the Knicks. The goal is take care of business. You knew going into that game the Knicks had everything locked up. They were going to play some of their reserves. But you also had to understand that those reserves were going to be playing with pride, and they certainly did that. And they also played very aggressively defensively. I mean, they were up in the shirts of the Charlotte Hornets ball handlers, and again, particularly, I would say there was a sequence in the third quarter where they had back-to-back turnovers where the Knicks would bring pressure. You can beat that, and not full court pressure, but half court pressure. You can beat that pressure. But screeners were indecisive. The ball handlers were indecisive. And then, whenever you're playing Alvarado, steals are going to be aplenty. They couldn't deal with that. So like that, to me, all of those things are concerns because whether or not you play Boston or whether or not you play Detroit or whether or not you advance and play New York or any of these teams, these are teams that can all apply defensive pressure, and you're going to have to be able to deal with that at some point. Yeah. And so, I think the Hornets are in a situation here where they have to prove, maybe in this play-in, they have to prove, hey, you can, because I think Miami has to be watching that New York game. They have to be watching that Detroit game and say, you can bother Hornets ball handlers. They're going to try the same things, and the Hornets have to prove they can beat it.
If you've ever opened your bank account and thought, where did all my money go? You're not alone. Keeping track of subscriptions, spending, and bills can get overwhelming fast. That's where Rocket Money comes in, helping you take control of all your finances in one place. How does Rocket Money help you keep track of those finances? It tracks all your subscriptions in one spot and can help cancel the ones you don't need with just a few taps. It can automatically categorize your spending so you can actually see where your money is going. It just makes everything feel more organized and gives you a clearer picture of your finances day to day. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Big Six in 60. Indiana basketball's portal haul keeps growing, with Marcus Burton headlining another wave of transfer additions after averaging 18.5 points per game in a season at Notre Dame. Jacob Goins with Locked On Hoosiers breaks down what Burton and the rest of those players that Indiana brought in will bring to the Hoosiers.
3 commitments for Indiana basketball out of the portal today. Jaden Mustaf from Georgia Tech, Darren Harris from Duke, and then Marcus Burton from Notre Dame. 3 names that you and I have discussed very much on this program. 3 guys that I felt very good about with Indiana. Burton and Mustaf more than Darren Harris, but Harris was in a good spot. Sounds like Indiana was very competitive with the offer that they made him, and he decided he wanted to be an Indiana Hoosier. And again, we're going to talk about some of the other names that Indiana could or might land in the portal coming up in just a moment, but this is a big day for Indiana, who has been working behind the scenes, obviously. And there's been a lot of the conversations on who would return versus who would be leaving. And yeah, there were guys who obviously ran out of eligibility, but then you had the Miles and Nick Dorn and those guys who are going to leave. Asimovich leaving too. That one was, I guess, right? But you also had a little news filtered in there today about Trent Sisley, which we'll probably talk more about on tomorrow's show. But we've been waiting on something to go down in the transfer portal, and it did today. Marcus Burton from Notre Dame, Jaden Mustaf from Georgia Tech, and Darren Harris from Duke. And I want to talk about the one that I think is most impactful, not to disrespect the other 2 guys, but Marcus Burton committing to Indiana is a big freaking deal, man. This guy is a baller. 6 foot tall, 190 pounds, only played 10 games this past year at Notre Dame. If you've been watching and listening to the show, you know that. He dealt with the injury, will be coming off of that, but I'm not overly concerned. But Indiana may have just found their starting point guard for next season. That's how big this is. That's how impactful he is. That's how talented he is. And that's why Indiana jumped on him early, and they never let him go. The in-state kid doesn't have to travel very far. He will be an Indiana Hoosier for the 26-27 season. Averaged over 18 points a game a year ago in just 10 games. The year before that, in 24-25, when he played in 26 games for Notre Dame, he averaged 21 points every time he stepped on the floor. That's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty big grab for this Indiana team. He also shot 37.5% from downtown. He's not afraid to shoot it from out there. 85% from the free throw line, 44% from the floor. He can rebound. He can pass the basketball. I think that's a sneaky good attribute that he has at the point guard position, which is what you want, but I don't think people talk about that enough with Marcus Burton, and this is the guy that Indiana wanted. This was the guy in the guard position that the Hoosiers did everything they could to go and land. And they did. They land Marcus Burton from Notre Dame. They also land 2 more guards from the transfer portal. Again, he's 6 foot tall. He is your true point guard, your shooter, your ball handler, your quarterback of the offense, if you will. Then you went and got a couple of guys who can score, who can handle the ball, but they can also defend. And I think that's what's big about Jaden Mustaf from Georgia Tech and Darren Harris from Duke. Let's go to Jaden Mustaf and talk about him for a moment. 10 points a game a year ago at Georgia Tech, 4 rebounds, 2.5 assists per game. He's 6'6" and 200 pounds. I think the 3 things that I want to highlight for Jaden Mustaf, the one is what I've talked a ton about, is his ball handling and his confidence of getting to the rack. Indiana missed that a year ago. You had 1.5 guards on the team that would do it. Indiana desperately needs that, and Jaden Mustaf is that. So that's the first thing that sticks out to me with the Georgia Tech transfer. The second thing is he's a sneaky good rebounder. 4 rebounds a game for a guard. He's 6'6", 210, yes, but a guy that got better at rebounding from his freshman season to his sophomore season, and some of his game totals are pretty remarkable. I mean, 8 rebounds against Cal, 7 rebounds against Florida State, 6 rebounds against Virginia. That's a top 15 team in the country. He had 11 versus Virginia Tech, 10 versus NC State, and so I think this is somebody who can get some of his points by crashing the offensive glass, But if he's able to grab rebounds on the defensive side of the floor, you feel good about him just turning up the floor and starting the offense, starting a break, somebody that's looking to get out and run. So handling the basketball, rebounding on both sides of the floor, and then his length defensively. You went and got Jaden Mustaf because he has size and he can hold his own on the defensive end. Because let's just call it like it is. Indiana's guards last year, other than Tate and Conaway at times, you were defensive liabilities. You got beat off the dribble. You were giving up threes. You were miscommunicating. You were helping where you didn't need to or weren't supposed to. And it led to a ton of open shots. It led to a ton of open lanes and different things of that matter. And so I think Jaden Mustaf will fix a lot of that. Marcus Burton will start at the point guard spot. Curious on if Jaden Mustaf ends up being that starting two, could even stretch into a three if you needed him to be that. But I love what he brings. I love what he's going to bring and be on this team and what his role will be, regardless of what that is. So Jaden Mustaf is very exciting. Then there's Darren Harris. There's the Duke transfer guard who, by the way, all three of these guys have 2 years of experience under their belts, 2 years of experience remaining, and it's all experience at the power conference level. Sounds a little bit different than what Indiana did last year, right? Even with as good as Lamar Wilkerson was, he came from Sam Houston. You're looking at guys who have been around the best of the best in their respective conferences. And funny enough, all ACC guys. How about that? I just put all that together. But Darren Harris is another bigger guard that Indiana brought in this afternoon. 6'5", 190 pounds, just completed his second season with the Blue Devils. And his numbers are not going to blow you away. They may not even impress you. 3 points a game, less than a rebound, half an assist. He did shoot 36% from the floor, but the people who talk about this guy from his high school days talk about how good of a shooter he is. Talk about how he is a spark when he steps on the floor and can get hot in a hurry. It's the microwave badge for you 2K players out there. A guy that can shoot it very well at any given time and doesn't need a whole lot of time to get going. I think that's why Indiana brought him in. Again, his numbers are not good by any means, just because he didn't play a lot. He averaged 6 minutes his freshman season and a little bit under 10 minutes this year at Duke. But he sat behind some pretty darn good guards there at Duke. And so I'm not overly concerned. This is a guy that Indiana brings in to be a depth piece, to be a shooter. I think he can be a ball handler. He is a good defender as well at a 6'5" frame. I think you bring him in to probably be in a backup role at that 2-guard spot, maybe backup point guard if you need to fill some time for Marcus Burton. But this is a very good start for Indiana in the transfer portal. 3 big guards, ones that Indiana wanted, they went after, and they landed them. Marcus Burton from Notre Dame, Jaden Mustaf from Georgia Tech, and now Darren Harris from Duke. And I want to continue this conversation after the break because those guys are great, and I think they are awesome additions for this Indiana roster.
The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, the extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. As we round out the regular season, the Celtics play the Knicks in Madison Square Garden tonight. Line is at -5 on FanDuel. If you want to go the other way, Boston money line is 176, plus 176 on that line. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. Iowa State basketball is dealing with a major off-season hit after Milan Momcilovic entered the transfer portal while also declaring for the NBA draft. It leaves the Cyclones without one of their top scorers, and Nick Maravets with Locked On Cyclones reacts to the loss.
It's said and done. Milan Momcilovic has finished his time as an Iowa State Cyclone, which is kind of crazy. Doesn't feel great. Not going to lie. But we finally got a little bit of clarity, I think, is probably the good thing. I did the show talking about Milan going to potentially Florida. Is he going to go to the draft? What's going to happen? I feel like now we know what's going to happen. Okay. So Milan Momcilovic was phenomenal this last season, honestly, for the last 3 years. But now he's released a statement. He is declaring for the 2026 NBA draft. It's where all of his full focus is right now. But he's also entering his name into the transfer portal. What does that mean? Basically, what's happening here is Milan is rolling the dice on the draft. And if it doesn't work out, he's in the portal. Okay. Why is that a good thing for Iowa State? Well, this cleared up any confusion, any possibility of Milan coming back. And not only for us as fans, but for TJ Otzelberger. How can TJ Otzelberger be expected to be competitive in the transfer portal when every second counts if he's not sure if he's going to get his best player back? So Milan released his statement, basically just a long-winded, and I will say, I don't think this was AI generated in the age of AI generated transfer portal, this, that, and the others. I think actually Milan wrote this, which is, irrelevant, but a very cool little nugget here. He talks about the success, how he, obviously big fan of Iowa State, the best years of his life, best fans in the country. We know that. Coaches and staff, teammates, and then dream of his to play in the NBA. At this time, turning full focus to the draft while also entering my name into the transfer portal. Pretty standard exit letter. It wasn't anything too crazy. Then he did reply to that original post. This looks like Facebook to me, which anything on Facebook, you got to keep, grain of salt in the back of your head there. But he said, quote, "I also want to note this was one of the hardest decisions ever. Going through the NBA combine draft and getting feedback takes time. With the day and age of the transfer portal now with college basketball, there is no time. I want Iowa State to be able to have all the firepower to keep building on the foundation that TJ and stuff, I'm assuming staff, has started. All the transfers coming in are great additions and will not disappoint. Love y'all forever, Cyclone Nation. Thank you for making Ames my home away from home." Basically, that's a reiteration of what I just said. Milan knows that he doesn't know what's going to happen. Knowing that is actually, it's like knowing something. It's worth knowing that you don't know. And that uncertainty, it will be resolved with time, but he can't say right now, all right, I'm coming back to Iowa State, or all right, I'm going to get drafted at this position, or whatever, right? And with that uncertainty, knowing that he's uncertain, he can act on that and say, all right, Otz, I appreciate everything you did for me. It's just not really going to make sense for you to wait and find out if what's going to happen with me. Then your team could be weaker as a result of it. And it's probably unlikely that you're going to be able to pay me what other schools in the transfer portal are going to be able to pay. If I don't get drafted, if I choose to transfer, they're probably going to have more leverage there. So it's better for me and it's better for you. It's a win-win all around. Let's just move on. There is something to be said about that. I think that's a good thing. The biggest, I think, as an Iowa State fan, and obviously is running the show or whatever, my hope is that Milan gets drafted, because that's the best case scenario for Iowa State fans, specifically the fans, I would say. For Milan, I don't know. It depends. It's literally up in the air for him. The reason I say that is if Milan ends up not, getting really the feedback from the draft that he wants, gets a really high number in the portal, and he ends up transferring, I'm not saying this from only my point of view. I do generally think that all of Cyclone Nation is going to be pretty hurt by that and really not going to enjoy that. I don't think, and I'm not saying that Milan is the greatest player in Iowa State history either. I'm not saying that Iowa State lost out on one of the best players of all time. Obviously a great shooter, great teammate. We love Milan. There's no real negative to Milan, but I'm not saying he's the best player of all time and Iowa State would win a title if he came back next season. I'm not saying that. But seeing Milan play for, Florida, or seeing Milan play for, who knows, like let's say UConn or some other team, and go deep in the playoffs, it's going to hurt. That is going to hurt. And it really comes down to money at the end of the day on where he goes. If he, ends up in the portal or ends up in the draft, or I guess it could depend on if he doesn't get any draft attention, potentially he would hit the portal for a low number, which just to me doesn't make any sense because he's 6'8" and shot 50% from three this last season. Like to say that he's not going to make the NBA at all just feels like probably unlikely just to me. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. For Iowa State, as far as Iowa State is concerned, the ultimate takeaway is that Milan Momcilovic will not be on the team next season. His time as a Cyclone has wrapped up. Records, moments, all of that is absolutely it stays set in stone. They still are a piece of Iowa State, of Cyclone history, of Milan Momcilovic history. What the future looks like, we don't know. Could be, Milan could be playing for the Timberwolves, could be playing for, I doubt it would be a G League team, but it could be a G League team. Could be playing, for Florida. At the end of the day, it really does not matter to Iowa State. Of course, unless they play Milan, I guess. That would be the only time it would really matter to Otzelberger and company. I am curious, if Milan were to end up at another college, hypothetically speaking, how would you feel? Would you be upset? Would you say you completely understand? I assume the money that he will get if it's from another college would be absolutely astronomical. Would probably be enough to make me pick up shooting three-pointers and try to get really, really good at that. Because my goodness, the way the transfer portal is obviously paying players, and the amount of success he had last season, specifically for Iowa State, and on a team that, without Joshua Jefferson still made the Sweet 16, probably could have gone a lot further with Joshua Jefferson. And Milan, obviously, he talked about didn't love his stinkers in the last 3 games of his tournaments. But still, besides that, played really well. Could have played even better if Jefferson was on the floor. A little bit of a question mark around his performance. Can boost that payday a little bit. I'm just curious how Iowa State fans are going to respond to that. I think I would be hurt. I wouldn't be upset. It would stink. I don't think I'd want to watch Milan play in another jersey next season. It's kind of the same thing with football. I don't think I want to watch Penn State play next season just to watch Rocco. That's not really what I'm looking forward to doing. I'm sure I'll see some highlights and it's gonna sting a little bit. Same thing with Milan. He's wherever he goes, whether it's the NBA or a college, is going to create highlights and it's going to come across my feed and I'm going to be like, man, remember when he was the Cyclone? I'm just curious how you guys will feel because it is clear his time as a Cyclone is officially up. That's it.
If you've ever opened your bank account and thought, where did all my money go? You're not alone. Keeping track of subscriptions, spending, and bills can get overwhelming fast. That's where Rocket Money comes in, helping you take control of all your finances in one place. How does Rocket Money help you keep track of those finances? It tracks all your subscriptions in one spot and can help cancel the ones you don't need with just a few taps. It can automatically categorize your spending so you can actually see where your money is going. It just makes everything feel more organized and gives you a clearer picture of your finances day to day. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. For the Patriots, draft strategy is front and center with the big day just more than a week away now. So Nick Cattles brought on Evan Lazar to talk about every which way New England could go on Locked On Patriots.
Let's jump right into this. How would you grade this year's draft talent compared to last year's draft talent?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think sometimes we get caught up in the top of the draft, and are there blue chippers? Is it a quarterback draft? So drafts that have one or a combination of those two things tend to get looked at as a great draft. Whereas drafts like this one, where I feel like there's a decent amount of depth especially at certain positions, really throughout, I would say, the third and fourth round of the draft, but it doesn't necessarily have that star power talent other than Mendoza maybe at the top of it. So it kind of gets labeled as a weaker draft because of that. So I think there's still plenty of depth. There's still plenty of talent. Now, maybe that is starting caliber talent instead of like superstar caliber talent. And that's where some of the bad juju comes about this draft. But I honestly feel like I love these types of drafts, Nick, because this is about doing your homework, right? This is about understanding your scheme fits, understanding your archetypes or molds that your team prioritizes, because my board as the Patriots is going to be significantly different than every other team's board in a draft like this one, because it's all going to be about what type of player are you looking for and what type of fit are you looking for. So if Elliot Wolf and Mike Vrabel and Ryan Cowden and Stretch and those guys all do their due diligence, which I'm sure they will, I still think the Patriots can come out of this draft with 3 or 4 guys that are going to contribute.
All right, let's start at number 31. We're all looking at the same needs. We're all talking about the same players. You do a ton of work. You know more about this draft than I do. That's going to be the case every single draft. I try not to present myself as some, draft expert guy. I mean, I'm aware of many of the players. I look at many of the players. I watch a lot of college football. But we all looking at tackle. We're all looking at wide receiver. We're all looking at edge, Evan. So my question is, if there were similar levels of talent at tackle, receiver, and edge at 31, what are you doing with that pick?
Well, I think that it's always a conversation of what happens afterwards, right? And the spot that I've sort of warmed up to, because honestly, Nick, like at the beginning of this process, the idea of taking a tackle 2 years in a row and then having that tackle then probably sit behind Morgan Moses for a year, it just didn't smell right to me, because they're just don't feel like they're really in that position yet to basically be taking a red shirt player or a luxury player at that spot. But with that being said, the talent at edge rusher and at wide receiver on day 2 of this draft is really, really good in my opinion. Whereas the talent on day 2 at tackle is basically non-existent. So if you don't take that tackle at 31 and you wait until day 2 or day 3 of the draft, I think you're really not talking about taking a tackle probably till 95 at the earliest. And now you're really starting to get into the territory of, do we even project this player has starting caliber talent? Is this a guy that we're drafting more to be a top swing tackle or a third tackle versus being somebody that we can really see being the right tackle of the future? So if all the talent was equal and normally in a draft like this around 31, it probably will be pretty similar at that spot. I still think tackle, just because of the lined up of need and where the gaps are in this draft, is a better bet, because you're going to be able to find guys at edge rusher and potentially at receiver that are going to be able to contribute with your second and third round picks.
For those who follow me on Twitter at Nick C Radio, and by the way, you can follow Evan as well at Easy Lazar. If you're looking at this draft, I know the moment. It was like 3 weeks ago, Evan. I started doing the mock drafts, Pro Football Focus, and my first mock draft I did for Locked On Patriots. Blake Miller happened to fall to 31, and I selected Miller with the pick, and then the rest of the draft fell the way it fell. I actually moved up in the second round to draft Malachi Lawrence, blah, blah. And then the next couple of mock drafts, I said, I'm not going to draft the tackle. So in mock draft 2, I went with Denzel Boston. And then the mock draft, the latest episode, the mock draft that I did, I actually started with an edge. And that's when you start to have the epiphany of what you're talking about. When you get to round 2 and you go, oof, the tackle class, I might as well just wait until day 3 at this point. Let me ask you this, though. There's a lot of talk about Maxie Henachor, a lot of talk about the aforementioned Blake Miller. I don't know if you're a Caleb Lomu guy. How would you rank the tackles? I'm not going to put Caden Proctor in there because I think he's going to be gone by then. How would you rank the remaining guys at that position at 31, the way you see it and who you like the most?
I definitely like Blake Miller the most. I think Blake Miller's experience, 50 plus starts at Clemson, his length, his athleticism, his pass protection is basically pro ready at this point. I think the one thing that you look at with him is power and ability to anchor, but also convert power in the run game and move people in the run game. I wouldn't say that's necessarily a strength of his. He's not a big time people mover or road grader, but at the same time, I think his pass protection skill, his hand fighting, his footwork out of his pass sets, his range to protect the high side or the outside edge, all those things are at this point, I think, probably the most polished or most ready out of that entire group. And I still think he has a pretty high ceiling because of the athletic profile and because of the measurables. Still only 22 years old. So it's not like we're talking about a big difference in age like we are with some of these other prospects at the top of the draft. So I still really like Blake Miller. To me, I would be really surprised if he makes it all the way to 31 because he is so polished and ready to step in right away. But that is easily the fairway pick, right? Like if you just want to split the fairway with one of these guys, that would be Blake Miller. When you get into Lomu and you get into Ionichor, now you're talking about two guys, in my opinion, that you're projecting a little bit more, maybe for different reasons. But with Lomu, the biggest thing that I came away from watching him is that offense is just kind of gimmicky. Like there's a lot of misdirection. There's a lot of read option. There's a lot of RPO elements to that offense, a lot of backfield actions. So you're not really watching him do a whole lot of NFL stuff. Like he's not coming off the ball and trying to move people in the run game. He's not pass setting, with traditional or true pass sets in an NFL sense. So you're projecting a lot with him, in my opinion, in terms of how his measurables, his athleticism, his movement skill is going to translate into the next level. With Ionichor, I see him doing a lot of more NFL type stuff, but he's just raw in terms of his technique. So Lomu is kind of like an unknown to me of how is this all going to translate? It's a nice ball of clay, but how is it all going to translate? And then Ionichor is, I see him setting against Texas Tech's edge rushers and moving his feet and being able to do a lot of different cool things, but it's inconsistent. The tape is pretty up and down.
All right, so we went through the tackle scenario. Of course, we got to talk about what happens if those guys are not there at 31, and that brings up Denzel Boston. If Denzel Boston is sitting there at 31, Evan Lazar, we talked about the tackles.
Yeah.
Let's say Ionichor, let's say Miller, they're both gone. Caden Proctor's gone. You're not in love with Caleb Lomu because of the stuff that you brought up about the offense on the college level that he plays in. And Evan Lazar is sitting there, and Denzel Boston has fallen into your lap at number 31. Are you in or out?
I'm in. I'm comfortable taking Denzel Boston at 31. I think his mold or his archetype again is somewhere in between like the Tet McMillan and Drake Londons of the world. And then obviously we have, the big time busts like Keon Coleman and N'Keal Harry that all scare us about this type of player. So it's a wide range of outcomes there, obviously between those two things. But I really feel like he's closer to Tet and Drake London because of how good he was in college against man coverage. I don't look at him as somebody that struggled to beat man coverage. He's got quick feet at the line of scrimmage. He does a lot of really good things in terms of winning early in the route, which allows him to, set up and get body positioning on cornerbacks. And then obviously you can see what he does at the catch point. Some of the strongest and just best hands and body control of any receiver in the draft. Where he's not quite, I would say, on that London McMillan, archetype, top of the ceiling is probably against zone. And then also I would say the build-up speed as a yak guy, he's not a big time mover after the catch. Like those guys, when you hit them in stride coming over the middle of the field, can really pick up speed as they go through the catch and break away and hit big plays. I don't necessarily see that with Drake London, with Denzel Boston, like I do with London and Tet, but I think that there's enough there that's similar that I feel comfortable with taking him. He's somebody that grew on me, and I kind of have gone back and forth because I'm not usually that type of guy. Like I usually like the KC Concepcion's, the Omar Cooper Jr.'s. Those are my types of receivers. But when you start to think about how he works with Drake May and the outside and the need for the bigger outside receiver within this Patriots offense, I can start to see a vision of how he would be fit in really well here.
That's all for today's Big 6 in 60. If you follow basketball, football, or college sports, the Big 3 in 30 has a half hour on the biggest news in the NFL, the NBA, and on campus, going up every weekday just like this one. Just search the Big 3 in 30 NBA, the Big 3 in 30 NFL, or the Big 3 in 30 college, wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 6 in 60.